Not all memories are created equal. Men, what did you do for your wives just a couple of weeks ago for Valentine's Day? Do you remember? Nothing. Nothing. Not your ex-wife, but that's what she's going to be, your wife. Okay, Ben, what did you do for your wife last year for Valentine's Day? Now you don't remember. What did you do for your wife in 2003 for Valentine's Day? I have had 44 Valentine's Days with my wife. 44. Oh, thank you. But I can tell you that I don't remember any of them, except for 1988. Because that was the year that I married her on Valentine's Day. I can tell you every detail of that day. Now, why do I say that? Not every Valentine's Day is created equal for me. Look, if you're out fishing every day, I get it. They all run together. You have great places to fish right here in Texas. And if you were out fishing every day of your life, you out fishing at some point, I said to you, what was fishing like on November 17th, 2018? I don't know. I'm out there every day. But if one day you're out there fishing and a guy walks up to you on the water, that is a day you will remember. Those are the kinds of memories that are included in these accounts, and they are early enough to be eyewitness accounts. That's what's important for me. When I'm working homicides, I'm asking the question, does the timeline tell me if the suspect is available to do the murder? Here I'm asking the question, does the timeline tell me if the writer is available to have actually seen it? It is. They are early enough. We're going to skip one more here. I'm going to go to this number 3 here. This is accuracy over time. Look, I've had cases where a guy doesn't give me a lot of evidence, but he does continue to change his story. These are all cases we did on Dateline. He changes his story over time. He kind of gives himself away. If you have to go back to your memory of what you actually have in your mind's eye, it usually comes out the same way. But if you just made that thing up from nothing, you don't have it in your mind's eye anymore because it never occurred. It's harder to remember your lie. And this is what was happening to him. I thought the same thing could happen here, though, right? So here, let's just say it is written early. Okay, great. But here it is, the life of Jesus. Here's the Council of Laodicea, where we sort this out and decide what we're going to put in our Bible. How do I know what happened in the middle? Maybe Jesus is a preaching rabbi in the first century, very, very nice guy. He preaches great messages. Sermon on the Mount's beautiful. But he never worked any miracles. He wasn't born of a virgin. He didn't rise from the grave. That's just stuff that was added to the story over time. So there is a Jesus of Nazareth, but he's not the Christ of Christianity. This is what Bart Ehrman says in his book, How Jesus Became God. He thinks that Jesus was morphed over time. Is that true? Look, something similar happens in criminal scenes, right? We have a crime scene and we go to a courtroom years later. And I'm going to put a piece of evidence in the crime scene for you. See that casing? I'm going to bring that casing into trial 30 years later. I'm going to tell the jury that that casing has an extractor pin mark on it, and that extractor pin mark matches the extractor pin in the handgun of the defendant. So I'm going to use that extractor pin mark to identify that casing from the crime scene to the suspect's pistol. Now, I think you could fairly ask, well, how do I know that that was really there in the beginning? Maybe it was collected, and then some point later, some lying detective etched in the extractor pin mark on the casing so it looks like it belongs to the handgun, and then carefully puts it back in property, and now we have a bad piece of evidence. The people who come along behind him, they don't know that it's been tampered with. They investigate it as if it's true. By the time I get it, I don't know that it's been changed. Something similar could happen down here. We have some piece of evidence, say a gospel, that eventually gets brought into the council. But how many times is it changed by somebody along the way? Once? Twice? You've got 300 years to work with. It's changed so radically, but by the time we get it to the council, the simple Jesus of Nazareth has become the Christ of Christianity. Do you see the complaint? So how do I check this in real crime scenes? Well, I go back to the top and I ask a question. Was there an officer there back in 1981 who saw that casing? Yes. Did he take a Polaroid? Do you guys know what a Polaroid is? You do? Who knows what a Polaroid is? Raise your hand. Not a Fuji camera. Yeah, I'm talking about a Polaroid. Okay. Well, we used to have Polaroids in our bags, our call-out bag. And if that officer took a picture, I should see the actual mark. If you wrote a report describing it, that would be good. Now, who did he give it to? Oh, he gave it to a detective? Did the detective write his own report, take his own picture? Who did he give it to? Oh, he gave it to the crime lab? They took all kinds of pictures and wrote all kinds of reports. I picked it up years later. I take a picture. I write a report. Now I've got image after image after image and report after report after report over time. I can see if the casing is being changed. Everyone here is like a link in a chain connecting the past to the present. That's why we call this, in criminal terms, the chain of custody. And in every criminal trial I've worked, there's been a big profile case. Every piece of evidence has been tested. What's the chain of custody for that piece of evidence? Is there a chain of custody for the New Testament? Yes, there is. I'm going to show it to you. So we have a crime scene at one end over here. We have our courtroom at this end. Who is the first officer who sees Jesus, who's going to report on him? Let's say it's John. So John's our first officer at the scene. Well, I'd like to know what John said. I don't have the copy of that first. I don't know what he said then. Well, who did he give it to? Yeah, he had 3 personal students. Did you even know this? His 3 personal students were Papias, Polycarp, and Ignatius. These 3 students sat at the feet of John. If I could just talk to these guys, next link in the chain, I could see, what did John say about Jesus? Was he supernatural? Did he work miracles? Did he rise from the grave? Is that stuff in there or is it missing? Because maybe it got added later. But I would know if I could just talk to those 3. Well, it turns out we can talk to those 3 because they became leaders in the local church and wrote letters to local congregations. We can read those letters. They're not in your Bible, but they're out there. And we can see if Jesus is as supernatural as John says he is, or is the story being changed over time? These 3 guys had their own student. Polycarp and Ignatius had a student named Irenaeus. Irenaeus, sitting at their feet, learned, I can see the story of changing over time. There's a bunch of stuff from from Irenaeus that you could look at and read. Irenaeus had a student named Hippolytus. So this is the next link in the chain. Now, I cannot find what I would consider a reliable student of Hippolytus. So the chain stops right here. But remember, if what you have at the beginning of the chain matches what you have today, you're good. It's the first links in the chain that really matter. Now, this is one chain of custody. In the book, I've written 2 more. This is Paul's chain of custody through Tatian. This is Peter's chain of custody all the way through to Eusebius in the council. Here's what I want to tell you. If you lost all of the Gospels, but you had the written works of the first links in the chain, the students of the eyewitnesses, it turns out you would not miss any part of Jesus. He'd be just as spectacular as he is today because that story is early and it never changes. So you cannot argue that this has been corrupted over time. Because it hasn't. You can test it. Now, I will say this. People still argue it. They'll say things like, I can't trust the Gospels because have you seen the original manuscripts? The manuscripts we have thousands of contradictions. What is she talking about there? Well, I want to show you what she's talking about because you may not hear it anywhere else. I always say, it's as bad as you say it is. Yep, you're right. I'm not going to say you're not. She's right. There are thousands of variations in the ancient manuscripts. She's right about that. And it doesn't matter at all. I'm going to show what she's talking about. I got to tell you this now because if I don't tell you here, someone's going to tell you later. If you wanted to know what the original Constitution of the United States said, you could go down to the Archive building in Washington, D.C. on the corner. You could go in the building and see the original Constitution, the original Declaration of Independence. You can see it right there under glass. Can you do that with the Gospel of John? No, we don't have the original. How about the Gospel of Matthew? No. Any gospel? No. Any letter of Paul? No. Any New Testament book at all? No. As Bart said, we don't have the original. And we don't have the first copy of the original. And we don't have a copy of the copy of a copy of the first copy of the original. The earliest manuscripts we have are centuries late. And when we compare them to one another, they don't match. They differ in thousands of places. If you didn't know that, you need to know that. This is why when he heard that in his undergraduate work, he walked away. He was a Christian before he started this. Then he walked away when he learned that. That's what he says in a book called Jesus Interrupted. I want to show you what he's talking about. Here's a page from the Gospel of John. Now, if you didn't notice this, I'm going to show you. It's all in your footnotes. If you've got an ESV like this, it's in your footnotes. Ancient manuscripts about this Gospel of John have it certain ways. For example, here, in your ESV, it says, I am not going up to this feast, for my time has not yet fully come. But there's another early manuscript that is slightly different. The early manuscript that's slightly different says, I am not yet going up to this. Now, granted, this is not a big difference. And even Bart Ehrman would say, no variation between the documents affects the person of Jesus or any theological position of Christianity. They're all like this. Are we clear? Here's another one, same page. ESV says, how is it that this man has learning when he's never studied? Another ancient document, and maybe your translation has the other ancient document, says, knows his letters. It means the same thing, but there are very different ways of saying the same thing. Why does one variation say it one way? Why does one translation say it? It seems kind of willy-nilly. Like, I'll just stick in whichever one I want. There's clearly two different manuscripts that can provide two different pieces of information. Here's another one, same page. If anyone is to do God's will, he'll know whether the teaching is from God or whether I'm speaking on my own authority. There's another ancient manuscript that says his will. Granted, this is not a big difference, but you can see there's three right here. By the way, this is just 25% of that page. So whatever I show you on this page, it's worse by 4. I didn't show you the stuff on this side. But when you add it all together, this is why Bart says this in his book. There are more variations among our manuscripts than there are words in the New Testament, and he's right. And it sounds terrible, and it doesn't matter at all. How do we know what Jesus said when you've got variations? Do you guys have iPhones? How many of you have an iPhone? How many of you have an iPhone 14? Losers. How many of you have Androids? Pathetic losers, okay? Seriously? You think you're different or something? Just pay a little more money and join the rest of us. What's wrong with you people? Anyway, I hate Siri. Do you hate Siri as much as I hate Siri? Siri is a wicked wench. She is a terrible person. She takes what I'm saying to her and she twists it, and then she sends it to people like I meant to say that. I got a text from my daughter-in-law. She's my daughter-in-law now, but she wasn't my daughter-in-law then. I'm about to get my first grandchild from this girl, so I love her very much. But Olivia, she came over for dinner, and she texted me, and she said, thanks for dinner. She came over with my son to my house. They had dinner. They went. And then she's typing me this text. So I don't know her. I met her one time. So I thought, I'm just going to text her. I was driving. So I heard the text come in. I had Siri read it to me. I told Siri to text her back. I wanted to text her something benign. I don't know her very well. Looking forward to seeing you soon. That's pretty benign, right? Siri does not understand the word Olivia. So she sends this message. That's not good, right? I'm in my 50s. This girl's in her early 20s, and she's getting this weird message. She did not respond. And I waited, and I got to where I was going, and I looked at my phone. Oh, my gosh. So I quickly texted her back. We've been laughing about this for 10 years. But I just want you to see that's what Siri does. Siri is evil. Not only that, your phone thinks it knows what you meant to say when you type. And as you're typing, it'll autocorrect your words. Yeah, I hate it too. I'll give you an example of that. Here's my son David. When he was in med school, he's a doctor. He was always broke. And so let's say he needs some money and he's tapped out. And I'm like, I'll tell you what, let's just meet. I'll meet you on Starbucks. How about the one on Main? At 4 o'clock on Wednesday, I'll bring you $5,000. So I send him a text. But the phone thinks it can correct my text. And this is what he receives. Okay, one of those is my fault, okay? I hit the wrong, but the rest is not my fault. I didn't say that. I think that's confusing. Okay, there you go. So I'm going to send him a second text. Here's my second text. Much better. Still got one typo. Okay, no problem. I'm particular about these kinds of things. I'll send him a third text. Here's my third effort. So he's got a good sense of humor, but I should probably correct that, right? So let me just correct that. So here we go. Oh, now I'm running naked down the street. Correct that quickly. Cover that up. There we go. Ta-da, good. I still got one. Okay, look. I think at this point, he gets it. But I don't care if he gets it. My thinking is, you have to, I got to get it right. So I'll not just stop at 5. I will text the holy dog snot out of this kid until I get it right. So I just keep on sending him texts. He's done with it. You are too, though. What business are we going to meet at? What day? Wednesday. What time? 4. How much money? 5,000. Where's it located? You think you know, yet you don't have a single inerrant text. As a matter of fact, now you have more variations between the texts than there are letters in the text. Yet you think you know how to return to an original. Why? Because you recognize it doesn't matter how many variations there are. What matters is how many copies do I have? Because if I have an abundance of copies, I can compare them to one another and successfully remove all of the variations. And this is the unbelievable truth about the manuscript evidence. It's not like the ESV writers are trying to decide between these two manuscripts. Let's toss a coin. Let's put it in this way. No, they are comparing not two manuscripts. Modern translations use all of them in manuscripts. So we can return to the originals accurately. This is why when you say to me, do you believe that the Word of God is inerrant? Yes. I believe the autograph is inerrant. The autograph is the original, but we don't have the original. But I believe we have a process in place to return reliably to the inerrant original. And that takes the confusion out of it. Yes, we know what the Gospels say because we've got so many copies.